Auston Matthews drafting in 2016 signaled a total vibe shift in Toronto. With the number 1 pick, the Toronto Maple Leafs added Matthews, touted as a game breaker who ripped up the Swiss League in his draft year, to a stable of young guns that people were already starting to take notice of. Matthews-Marner was drafted number 4 overall the year prior and had just dominated the OHL to the tune of 116 points in 57 regular season games, then 44 points in 18 games to win the OHL championship. This loaded London Knights team then added the Memorial Cup to their insane season, and Mitchie won the CHL Player of the Year, the OHL MVP, the OHL Playoff MVP, and the Memorial Cup Tournament MVP awards this season. You can see why Leafs fans were hyped about the prospect of seeing him in the blue and white. And not to be discounted, a young William Nylander had also erupted onto the scene. After being drafted 8th overall by the team in 2014, the young Swede tuned up the Swedish Elite League, scoring 8 goals and 12 assists in 21 games. His electric play earned him a call-up to the Toronto Marlies, where he played at a sensational level for an 18-year-old. He scored 32 points in 37 games and dragged the bottom-feeding Marlies to the 2015 Calder Cup playoffs. A cup of coffee for the big club in 2016 whetted Leafs fans' appetites and left them wanting more. Along with the momentous addition of John Tavares via free agency in 2018, these 4 formed Toronto's core 4 for this Matthews-Marner era in the 6. They were the foundation for the Shanaplan.
The Shanaplan.
A young team brimming with optimism and fervor that unexpectedly made the playoffs in their rookie season and captivated Toronto's beleaguered fan base. Amid this city's ravenous media market, whispers of a potential dynasty took hold, which consumed the fans and ratcheted up expectations for this young squad, especially when Tavares joined the fray. But over the years, darkness crept back into the thoughts of Leafs fans.
I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost.
Optimism gave way to bleak reality over the years, as the Leafs were consistently bounced in the opening round of the playoffs. In 2020, they were even eliminated in the pre-playoff round before the real playoffs began by the Columbus Blue Jackets, giving a new meaning to early playoff exits. Year after year, despite changes to the rest of the roster that gave fans hope, this team failed to deliver. And now in 2025, Matthews-Marner, the 28-year-old regular season phenom who has dazzled Toronto fans for the last 9 years and is one of the greatest players in franchise history, left to sign with the Las Vegas Golden Knights, slamming the door on this Leafs era and pushing the team into an uncertain future. This is a team that has broken fans' hearts countless times and left them feeling like a chance to create a dynasty has slipped through the team's fingers. And Marner, a local boy who could have been the Leafs' hometown hero, left town after years of simmering resentment turned a dream scenario into something that looks like rickety cricket. But why? What happened? Well, it's one hell of a failure to launch. Elation. That's the word that describes the Leafs' 2016-2017 season. It's 2016 and the Leafs are coming off their worst season in 25 years. A 29-42-11 season that was the result of an aggressive tanking process. Former Leaf stalwarts Phil Kessel, Dion Phaneuf, James Reimer, and other various players have been auctioned off at various points over the last year, resulting in 53 losses. A franchise record. They also sent out Carter Verhaeghe for Michael Grabner. Sick move, boys. However, this tank job bore fruit immediately. The Maple Leafs entered the draft lottery with a 20% chance to pick first in the next draft, and left the building with the right to do exactly that.
The first overall selection in the 2016 NHL draft belongs to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Certified top prospect Auston Matthews was now in their hands. A generational prospect that injected life into this team. Matthews had just potted 24 goals and 22 assists in 36 games for the ZSC Lions of the Swiss National League, Zurich, which is a unique hockey team for an 18-year-old American to be playing for. You see, Matthews missed the 2015 NHL draft cutoff date of birth by 2 days, so he was agonizingly close to playing in the show. And he probably would have been a top 3 pick in what might have been the most loaded top 5 ever. This guy was already 6'2" and 194 pounds too. He had the body, the mass, to play in the pros. So when Zurich's head coach and former NHL bench boss Mark Crawford came calling after seeing Austin tear up the under-18 Worlds, he signed up. Making $400K to play hockey in Switzerland as an 18-year-old is a pretty sick gig. With all that in mind, he was the obvious pick for the Leafs. In addition to Matthews, 19-year-old Mitch Marner and 20-year-old William Nylander made the team out of training camp. Fellow top prospects who impressed Leafs coach Mike Babcock enough to crack the roster. Maple Leafs GM Lou Lamoriello was excited about his team's fresh faces, but was well aware of the team's need for stability, both in net and in the locker room. He accomplished the former by swinging a trade for Anaheim Ducks goaltender Frederik Andersen, Freddie, and instantly signed him to a 5-year, $25 million extension. Freddie had played well in his 3 years as a Mallard, and even split the Jennings Trophy with John Gibson last season. A pretty nice swing from Lou to try to acquire a starting tendy. Later in the offseason, the Leafs traded Jonathan Burney to Anaheim for a bag of pucks, clearing the starting job for Freddie. The team in front of Andersen needed some improvements as well. At this point, we had no idea how the 3 rookies would play, though optimism was abound. So, Lou brought in veteran roughhouser Matt Martin and the big sturdy Roman Polak. The Martin move was an immediate hit. Matthews and Marner loved this guy, and he really helped these kids adapt to NHL life. Martin also held the record for most hits in a single season at the time. That's a guy I want. With these additions, the Leafs squad now consisted of the dynamic young rookies Andersen, James Van Riemsdyk, Nazem Kadri, Tyler Bozak, Morgan Riley, Jake Gardiner, and also rookies Connor Brown and Zach Hyman. In retrospect, it's clearly a pretty good team. And they erupted out of the gates. Matthews especially, who came out swinging his dick all over Canada's capital. He scored 4 goals in his first ever game, the first player to do that in modern NHL history. I lived in Ottawa at the time and will never forgive myself for not going to this game. The Leafs ended up losing the game in overtime anyway, but still, what a debut. Anyone who was calling bust had their trap shut immediately. The losing continued for much of October 2016 as this team of mostly rookies struggled to get their feet under them, leading to a 2-4-3 October. Though the offense was clearly flowing, as Nylander was named the NHL's Rookie of the Month for October thanks to his 11 points in 9 games, good enough for second in the league in scoring. An 8-5-1 November showed this team was for real though. They then played steady hockey the rest of the way, impressive for such a young team. But the team couldn't leave 2016 without anything going wrong. In a December game against the Colorado Avalanche, Babcock shuffled Marner to the 4th line after a 4-game point drought. It was only brief, but it was something that apparently bugged Marner in his camp years later. Those around Marner argued that the Leafs would never do that kind of thing to Matthews, a comparison that is often brought up throughout this era. That, along with Babcock's fucking weird trust exercise with Marner, are the first ingredients for this fabulous resentment stew. Back to this vibey season. Clutch wins over the Hurricanes, Bruins, Nashville, and Pittsburgh helped the team clinch a playoff spot in these kids' rookie season, and the team finished with 95 points. Toronto's highest point total in 12 years. And these young guns deserved it, as they notched a plethora of team records. Aside from his 4-goal debut record, 34 scored the most points by a rookie in Leafs history with 69, the most goals by a Leafs rookie with 40, and the most game-winning goals by a Leafs rookie with 8. Insane shit. He even won Rookie of the Year, the first Leaf to do that since Britt Selby 50 years prior. Willie had himself a year too. He crafted a 12-game point streak throughout March 2017 that is the longest rookie streak in Leafs history. The Hot Swede also set the records for most power play points and goals by a Leafs rookie, a main reason the power play clicked to the tune of 23.36%. Much better than the dogshit 15.44% success rate they had last year. It's funny seeing Willie with 29 on the back of his sweater. Marner had the most assists by a Leafs rookie ever, and even Hyman got in the fun, hitting the longest assist streak for a Leafs rookie and the most shorthanded goals. These broken records also highlight just how long the Leafs have been failing to develop their own prospects. But let's save that negativity for later. Right now, in this time, 2017, the vibes were incredible. Toronto had only gone scorched earth on their roster less than 2 years ago, and now they were in the playoffs with a young and promising team. The vets had stellar years too. Man, it was a time. It only goes fucking up from here, boys. Preparing for their playoff run, the Leafs made a couple of low-cost adds at the deadline, bringing the hulking Brian Boyle and Eric Fair to the Big Smoke. Some big boys to help them in the playoffs. In the postseason, they faced off against the President's Trophy-winning Washington Capitals, who went 55, 19, and 8. A veteran team that still hadn't broken through yet, despite rostering a top goal-scoring weapon. These Caps were still heavily favored to win the series. But these Leafs were plucky, forcing the series to 6 games and winning 2 games in OT. These calls were electric.
Cadney to the front of the net, they score! Tyler Bozak with a tip-in! And Toronto has the series lead!
The Shanaplan.
Kasperi Kapanen has been scoring clutch goals his whole career. OGs remember being just as excited for this kid to break through as the other young guns. Unfortunately, they still lost in the first round, for the first time, but more than held their own. 5 of the games went to OT, only the 3rd time this has happened ever, and the kids played well for their first ever playoffs. Matthews even had 4 goals. And with that, the sun set on this magical Leafs season. First round exits weren't bitter yet, and this team was overflowing with promise. They were young and were going to get even better. Fuck yeah. After that great year, Hyman and Brown signed extensions they truly earned, while Boyle and Fair were out the door after their mercenary playoff run. Then at the 2017 draft, Leafs brass drafted Swedish defenseman Timothy Liljegren with the 17th overall pick. The consensus top-ranked defenseman in the class at the beginning of the year, thanks to his elite skating ability, a bout with mono derailed his year and sent him tumbling down draft boards, right into the Leafs' lap. When free agency opened, Lou once again emphasized veteran leadership. He signed San Jose Sharks legend Patrick Marleau to a hefty 3-year deal and also inked steady D-man Ron Hainsey to a 2-year pact. Marleau left the only team he had ever played for to sign with the Leafs, voicing belief in the team's young studs and the Leafs sports science team as the main reasons he decided to leave the Bay Area. So, a couple of additions, but nothing major. If this team was going to take the next step, it was going to come from within, from the power of friendship. And this team did improve, flashing some pretty crazy offense by winning the first 2 games 7-2 and 8-5. These guys shrugged off any semblance of a sophomore slump and romped their way to 2 10-win months, November 2017 and February 2018. Matthews went point per game this year, though a variety of ailments kept him out of the lineup for 20 games. It was Mitchie that led the team in points in their sophomore years, scoring 69 in 82 games. Willie notched 61 in a full season, while Kadri and JVR both had 30-goal years. Marleau almost joined that club too. I'm a sucker for a player that scores more goals than assists, aka a snipe show, and this Leafs team had 4 of them. Electric. Young D-men Riley and Gardner also showed up, as both posted 52 points. The offense was cooking, and it served up quite the season. The Leafs went 49, 26, and 7, breaking their franchise record for wins in the regular season. The record was only 46, which is honestly pretty piss poor for a franchise that existed at the same time as the Ottoman Empire for 5 years. Freddie was the Leafs' workhorse, as he started 66 games and won 38 of them with a pretty great save percentage. Backup Curtis McElhinney also had a year, even leading the league in even-strength save percentage. Due to their success, Lou and the Leafs brass decided to ride out the contracts of JVR, Bozak, and Komarov, all of whom were playing on expiring deals. Another example of early roster aggressiveness, aka spending assets at the deadline that became a yearly occurrence. These guys were the team's very own rentals, though they did decide to add Habs veteran Thomas Plekanec and his famous turtleneck to help fortify the center position. With that, playoff season began. This year, the Leafs matched up against their hated black and yellow rivals, the Boston Bruins, in the first round. The first of many Atlantic Division dogfights the Leafs would contest in the coming years. These Bruins had won 50 games and finished 7 points ahead of the Leafs. taking home ice advantage for themselves. Bruins stalwarts Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, Tuukka Rask, and Brad Marchand still remained from their famous Game 7 victory against the Leafs in 2013. But young guns David Pastrnak and Jake DeBrusk were new and added a different element to the Bees' offense. And Boston looked like the better team, as they pranced to a 3-1 series lead. Pastrnak was fucking gross, scoring a hat trick and 3 assists in their Game 2 win. On the Leafs side, Kadri leaned a little too far into the team's mutual animosity with this vicious hit on Tommy Wingels that earned him a 3-game suspension. Toronto lost 2 out of the 3 games Kadri missed, but his return helped spark the team's comeback. Freddie stood on his head to help the team survive Game 5. Then Zaitsev, of all players, assisted 2 goals in a 3-1 Game 6 win. Which brings us to a familiar situation that the Leafs excel in, Game 7. This time, they faced the daunting task of beating the Bruins in their own barn. Amazingly, this Leafs team shook off its Game 7 jitters and led the game 4-3 at the second intermission, overcoming a 3-2 Bruins first period in the process. Thanks to 2 clutch goals by Marleau, including this rip, a Travis Dermott goal, and this beautiful shorthanded Kapanen dangle, the Leafs were in position to win their first playoff series since 2004. They just needed to survive the third period. Cue a 4-goal Bruins third that executed the Leafs' 2018 playoff run and ended the core sophomore season. A classic Freddie 5-hole goal courtesy of a tumbling DeBrusk to make it 5-4 Bruins was the turning point. Pastrnak then scored on a woeful defensive breakdown, and Marchand iced the game with a last-minute empty netter. Brutal. On the ice for that Marchand goal, Marleau, Bozak, JVR, Marner, and Gardner. A veteran-heavy last-minute line that notably excluded Matthews and Nylander as Babs leaned on his vets to come through for the team. They didn't. Marner was one of the Leafs' best players during this series as he notched 9 points in 7 games and played the kind of defensively responsible hockey that Babcock loved. In comparison, Matthews and Nylander really struggled, and Kadri only notched 2 assists in the 4 games he played. Freddie, their steady workhorse, also collapsed under the pressure. He allowed some pretty shitty goals on the route to a 3.76 GAA and an .896 save percentage in the playoffs, a long way off his great regular season performance. And with the season over, Lou, who had just worked the last of the 3-year pact he signed in 2015, was shown the door by Shanahan. It was clearly the plan all along. Lou was pretty emotional during this year's playoff run, as if he was fighting to stay. What kind of GM would want to leave this team? Leave this chance to build around some elite youngsters? But Lou produced mixed results during his time in Leafland. The trade for Freddie was a banger, especially at this point, but Zaitsev and Marleau's contracts were fucking pretty bad, and his deadline additions sucked. Even so, Lou deserves credit for rebuilding the 2015 shipwrecked Leafs. In only 3 years, this team broke the franchise's all-time record for wins. Not too shabby. And his exit would polarize Leafs fans for years. But the Shanaplan was still executed. Lou walked, and Kyle Dubas was promoted to the big job. The Golden Boy had ascended the throne, leaving Lou and fellow assistant GM Mark Hunter, who had led the Leafs draft process for the last 3 years, in his wake. The Dubas era was upon Leafs land. With the 17-18 season over, this mini era of the Leafs was dead and gone. It had positive vibes and a fan base that was just excited to be back in the playoff mix. It was a good time, even though the Game 7 loss to the Bruins stung. But it was over, and this vibey time was replaced by real expectations when Dubas pulled off a remarkable move, signing former number 1 pick and Islander star John Tavares to a 7-year, $77 million contract on July 1st, 2018.
Toronto Maple Leaf fans could be forgiven if this Canada Day felt more like Christmas Day. They learned superstar John Tavares had signed with the team. He announced his intentions on Twitter.
And it's a huge signing for the Leafs. But one of the things I think the Leafs were really trying to sell to John Tavares was, we're going to have a team where Austin Matthews and William Nylander are on one line, and that you're going to play with Mitch Marner.
A fucking massive play that rocked the NHL world. We couldn't believe our luck. John Tavares, one of the NHL's most dangerous offensive players and a Canadian Olympian to boot, was coming home to play out his childhood dream in the prime of his career. He was only 27. The team's potential was a massive appeal to the Canadian star, as he cited their great opportunity to win the Stanley Cup together as a main reason he chose the Leafs offer over the larger offers by the Islanders and the San Jose Sharks. The core four was now assembled. The Leafs could now run an absolutely devious 1-2-3 punch down the middle of their lineup with Matthews, Tavares, and Kadri running the first three lines. Fucking incredible, and it instantly made the Leafs the Stanley Cup favorites. But Johnny Toronto's huge contract complicated the Leafs roster in a variety of ways. Firstly, they had to move on from JVR, Bozak, Komarov, Plekanec, and Polak to help make room for this bonanza of a signing, a cost that Leafs brass and the fanbase were fine with. But his deal also likely inflated his co-stars' new deals, a tougher pill to swallow and one we'll get around to in a moment. Let's go through Dubas' other moves this offseason first. In his regime, truculence was out, so Matt Martin went the way of the dodo, back to Long Island. At the 2018 draft, Dubas scooped up Rasmus Sandin, a Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds alum just like Dubas, and the start of the Sioux trend. He also drafted Sean Durzi and Pontus Holmberg. Not bad. When the season began, a notable name was absent though. William Nylander was holding out after failing to come to terms on an agreement with the Leafs in the offseason. A restricted free agent, Willie could have signed an offer sheet with another franchise, but teams shied away from it. So, Dubas and Nylander sat in uncomfortable silence as this new looks Leaf squad started playing hockey. And these guys started the year off hot. They won an impressive 18 games over the first 2 months of the season, truly living up to preseason expectations, and sat at a pretty 19-8 on December 1st, the deadline for RFAs to sign by and still be eligible to play that season. And Nylander still hadn't signed. This tense stare down had dragged into its final hours with neither side blinking. Willie reportedly wanted $8 million per year on a long-term deal, money the Leafs weren't willing to pay. Then, Nylander blinked. Him and his agent called Dubas 45 minutes before the deadline and came to terms on a 6-year, $41.4 million deal, a $6.9 million AAV. Fuck yes. But since he signed late, the first year was prorated to $10.2 million, a figure that every Willie hater quoted to death the rest of that year. But he was finally in the fold, which meant we could finally focus on hockey. Except, Dubas still had some irons in the fire, namely Matthews and Marner's new contracts, which weren't going smoothly either. Dubas strangely hadn't started negotiating Marner's new contract in the summer when Mitchie was coming off of a 69-point season, as he abided by an old Lou rule. Now with Marner starring as Tavares' new setup man, leverage was beginning to tip in Marner's favor. In his camp, aka his dad Paul Marner and agent Darren Ferris, were vocal about it. First, Paul Marner did an interview with The Athletic where he made it clear that he thought his son should be named captain, and that media speculation that focused on Matthews and Tavares as C candidates drove him nuts. Speaking of Matthews, his negotiation went a little smoother. Dubas extended Matthews on a 5-year, $58.17 million deal with an average annual value of $11.63 million, beating Tavares' $11 million AAV, which was clearly the comp Matthews' agent went for. This happened on February 5th, 2019, super early by Dubas standards. But the Leafs and Marner failed to come to terms this season, meaning it would drag into the summer. And on the same day that Matthews signed his extension, on what should have been a joyous occasion for the club and its fans, Darren Ferris told the Toronto Star that the Leafs had lowballed Marner in extension talks.
Seems that envy is my sin.
Regardless, this team had hockey to focus on. A midseason slump took the shine off of their hot start, but it was still a season for the ages. Marner truly broke out in 18-19 as he piled up 68 assists and 94 points in 82 games. Gaudy assist numbers, many of which came via the Marner's-Tavares connection. Tavares scored 47 goals in his debut Leaf season, which is still his career high by a significant margin. Johnny Toronto was dealing this year. Matthews again dealt with injuries this year, missing 14 games due to a shoulder injury he suffered from being on the end of this Jacob Trouba hit. But The Star did kick off the year with 12 points in 5 games, and finished the season with 37 goals and 36 assists. Nylander, meanwhile, struggled badly after returning from his contract stare-down. Maybe a case of indulging in a few too many Swedish cinnamon rolls and models during his exile? More power to him. Or it's just hard to jump into a season that's almost half over. But the totals were disappointing for a player on a 10.2 mil cap hit, 7 goals and 20 assists in 54 games. It was a bruising blow to Dubas, but one that was slightly offset by a fantastic breakthrough campaign from Morgan Rielly. The 24-year-old D-man potted 20 goals and 52 assists. Electric. The guy even broke Bobby Orr's record for most points by a D-man in a team's first 5 games with a scorching hot 12 points. Kadri had a subpar year for his standards, only scoring 16 goals and 28 assists on the third line. But 20-goal seasons by Kapanen, Hyman, and Andreas Janssen gave the Leafs the depth scoring they needed to chug along. And chug along they did, as the team managed to go 46, 28, and 8. Good enough for third in the Atlantic and another first-round date with the Boston Bruins. Revenge time, baby. This Leafs team was different from a year ago, too. They still wielded Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Freddie, and Rielly, but Tavares and trade deadline addition Jake Muzzin gave this still young core some veteran leadership and grit. Just what the team needed. Muzzin, a grizzled and hulking D-man who'd won a cup with the Kings in 2014, was a great add, and one that grated against the public perception that Dubas only liked small players. This guy was 6'3" and 227 pounds. Big boy. And it was just a coincidence that he was a Sioux Greyhound. Nothing to see there. His addition did come with a cost, though, as the Leafs had to send Sean Durzi, Carl Grundstrom, and their first-round pick in 2019 to acquire him. Steep, but worth it to shore up the Leafs' D and bring a big lad in to duel with the Leafs' hated black and yellow foes. But this Leafs team rarely shined like everyone expected it to, despite the glitzy addition of Johnny Toronto and his marvelous goal scoring. Their team's defense was still suspect, as they allowed 251 goals against, 36 more than the Bruins allowed. The bottom 6 failed to provide the effective checking presence that Babcock wanted so badly to complement the skill of the top 6, and their penalty kill sucked ass again. So, things weren't all shiny and fun when the playoffs started, but this Leafs team came out swinging. They won the first game 4-1 in Boston, powered by 2 goals from the 21-year-old Marner.
On a penalty shot. And the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Fuck yeah, dude. In Game 2, Kadri once again embroiled himself in controversy. After this hard hit on Marleau by DeBrusk, and an early uncalled knee on Kadri, again by DeBrusk, Kadri saw red and skated into his last moment as a Maple Leaf. He landed a brutal cross-check to DeBrusk's face, so the Department of Player Safety suspended him for the rest of the first round. Nylander was forced to center the third line in Kadri's absence and never really got anything going. Willie Styles was not styling this year. But the team bounced back from this controversy and won 2 of the next 4 to take a 3-2 series lead, which included stealing another one away from home. So, the Leafs returned home with a chance to execute their hated rivals. A glorious opportunity for the series underdog. Rielly scored first, a huge jolt of energy to the Leafs and the starving fans in Scotiabank Arena. But the Bruins do as they do and stormed back, tucking away 3 straight, including 2 on the power play. Matthews scored his 5th of the series to bring the Leafs within 1 goal of tying the game, but Brad Marchand smothered that hope when he scored a late empty netter. His 2nd goal in that do-or-die game for the Bruins. Missing this opportunity to eliminate the Bruins stung, but they were still in the series. A Game 7 awaited, a chance to exercise this franchise's filthy Game 7 demons. Ride forth, noble warriors. And they did, right into the jaws of this Bruins dragon, Tuukka Rask. Their star goalie who was a Leafs draft pick in another age. The Bruins scored an early softie against Freddie before a terrible defensive miscue by Jake Gardiner put Toronto down 2 going into the second. The Leafs piled on the pressure in the second, and a Tavares wrister brought them within 1. But an early third backbreaker courtesy of Sean Corrali and a couple of empty netters forced the Leafs into another early playoff retirement. I mean, It's hard to overcome the Bruins' combo of depth and a star goalie that actually steps up in clutch moments. It was depressing. And that brought the 18-19 season, one where Toronto entered the year as Stanley Cup favorites, to an end without progressing past the first round for the 14th season in a row. Brutal shit. And the Eye of Sauron, Toronto's media, focused its putrid gaze on Mike Babcock, the coach who was failing to lead these young stars to glory. His refusal to play Matthews and Marner together, except for Game 7 when he was desperately hunting for a goal, was beginning to irk pretty much everybody. A lukewarm defense from Dubas didn't do much to quiet the growing speculation either. But to be honest, it was a bit of a deflection. Babcock certainly didn't optimize this lineup, as his continued deference to veterans never seemed to move the needle. But this team had 2 chances to deal crushing blows and win the series, and twice they failed. They were trounced at home in Game 6 and outplayed in Game 7. The big guys didn't show up. We've seen it before. With the season over, the Leafs hit the Lynx, while Dubas and his team hunkered down for a busy summer window. And before we go any further, I'd like to touch on the Leafs' current contract commitments. On July 1st, 2019, the Leafs had Matthews' $11.64 million salary on the books for the new league year, accompanied by Tavares' equally bougie $11 million deal, Nylander's $6.9 million, and Riley's and Freddie's matching $5 million salaries. All of this, and Marner wasn't even signed yet. Funnily enough, no one in Toronto even cared about these big deals. Not a peep. But when it did occasionally come up, Leafs brass did a little hand-waving shush-shush while they cited the rising cap. The cap had jumped over $10 million in 5 years, so each year of growth would provide the Leafs with more wiggle room and shrink the relative burden of their long-term deals. And it was guaranteed to rise. Nothing could stop it. But agents knew this too, and Marner's camp wasn't going to settle for a contract like Nylander's. Marner had scored 94 points this season. His defensive game was growing, and he had led the team in scoring in last year's playoffs. So, negotiations turned ugly. The Leafs offered Marner a 7 or 8 year deal with an $11 million cap hit, which he turned down because, well, how it compared to AM34's deal.
Seems that envy is my sin.
TSN analyst Darren Dreger helped pile on the pressure too, when he took Paul Marner's and Darren Ferris's dicks out of his mouth. It was toxic. The fans hated it, Marner hated it, and this dragged on through the whole summer. In the meantime, Dubas was wheeling and dealing to upgrade other parts of the roster. First, he paid a huge price to offload the 1 year left on Patrick Marleau's deal, as his $6.25 million cap hit needed to be moved to fit Matthews and Marner's new deals. Kyle paired Marleau with the Leafs' 2020 first-round pick to move him to Carolina, a steep cost to move on from a Lou Lamoriello contract. That pick? Seth Jarvis. Then on July 1st, 2019, the Leafs really doubled down on the roster shuffle, moving Connor Brown and Nikita Zaitsev's bloated deal to Ottawa for Cody Ceci and a couple of spare parts. Then the biggie, trading away their homegrown star Nazem Kadri on the heels of a second devastating playoff suspension. Nazem the Dream was shipped to Colorado in exchange for Tyson Barrie, Alexander Kerfoot, and a 6th rounder. A deal that was spun as Dubas' solution to the lack of right-handed D-men on Toronto's roster. First off, it was not an answer. And trading away Kadri when his value was at its lowest due to his third-line role and the playoff suspension wasn't a good idea. Honestly, it was shit asset management. But we move on. Dubas then signed slick vet Jason Spezza to a 1 year deal, and he had also signed some extensions before July 1st. Most of the roster shuffle came via those trades. When training camp rolled around into September, Marner was still unsigned. But after sitting out 1 day of training camp, the two sides came together. Finally. Marner signed a 6-year, $10.893 million per year contract that would walk him straight to free agency. The team not signing him to that 8-year, $8 million per year deal last summer hurt, sacrificing millions in cap flexibility. But the cap was going to keep going up, right?
The Shanaplan.
Regardless, Marner was finally back in the fold. It was go time. Then on opening night, the Leafs officially named Tavares captain. Johnny Toronto is now the Buds leader. Sorry, Paul. At least Mitchie got himself a fat deal. The vibes were positive. Matthews kept it going too when he became the 4th player in NHL history to score in his first 4 season openers, and they beat the Sens 5-3. Fun stuff. This team was ready to compete for a cup, but not so fast. The Leafs and their newly christened leader faltered early. A 6-game losing streak had the team sitting at a subpar 9-10-4 record after 23 games, and they were a far cry from being a contender. Babcock was feeling the heat. His relationship with Dubas was clearly fraying, and their philosophies on how to build a winning roster were at odds. The Leafs' struggles under Babs went back beyond this season too. They ended last season on a 20-17-6 run. A losing record. Not elite. Yeah, he had some dismal Michael Hutchinson performances to point to as to why the team was struggling, but really this team hadn't played well for close to a year. It was clear he had lost the room, and after practically stapling Matthews' ass to the bench in last year's Game 7, he had lost a lot of the fan base too. So on November 20th, 2019, Dubas axed Mike Babcock. As Toronto's coach, Babs guided the team to a 173, 133, and 45 record, but was only 8-12 in the playoffs. At his departure, the Leafs had allowed the second most goals in the league, and only had 2 regulation wins in their last 16 games. Not good enough. Rest in peace, Babsocks. I liked you guys. Sheldon Keefe, the Toronto Marlies head coach and an old friend of Kyle Dubas's, who was being groomed for the top job in Toronto, ascended the throne. He had coached the Marlies for 5 years now, and racked up a 199, 89, and 31 record in that time, including winning the franchise's first Calder Cup in 2018. Now it was time for him to prove his success could carry over to the show. And bang did Chief Keefe come out firing. His Leafs went 12-4-1 over the rest of 2019, and Keefe's more possession-heavy style appeared to suit the team. The offense was clicking. Dubas then went shopping again, this time picking up goalie Jack Campbell and mean forward Kyle Clifford. Not bad. But Trevor Moore had to go to LA in this deal. Then the Leafs traded the big but still unproven Mason Marchment for Dennis Malgin, a smaller, slicker player. Yeah, a terrible Dubas trade in hindsight. The team cooled off to start 2020, including losing a game to the legendary David Aries, a Zamboni driver goalie, but were firmly back in the playoff picture and had a record of 36, 25, and 9 on March 10th, 70 games into the season, when the world changed forever.
COVID-19 globally is 266,073. There have been 11,184 deaths, and there are cases in 183 countries and territories. In Canada,
COVID-19 forced the NHL to suspend their season. At this point, the disease was already being viewed as a massive threat, but no one really wanted to suspend play. Then, a French man touched a bunch of microphones in Utah before testing positive, sparking controversy and shutting down sports across the world. At this juncture, the end of the 1920 regular season, as we'd soon find out, Matthews was having a stellar year. The 21-year-old was on pace for the first 50-goal Leaf season since Dave Andreychuk in 93-94. The guy was electric this year. Mitchie was having himself a pretty good year as well, piling up the assists once again with a Thornton-like 51 in 59 games. He did only have 16 goals, however, but that was due to missing some time in the fall with a lower body injury. William, meanwhile, was making up for his lost 18-19 season, as he turned into a snipe show and hit the 30-goal mark for the first time. Tavares was also playing well, but he wasn't hitting the highs of his 47-goal debut season. New addition Tyson Barrie was piling up points, but his defensive play was, to be polite, lackluster.
I don't know, like he was so bad, Noodles. I mean, you watched it, I don't have to tell you.
Some good news though, as hometown boy Zach Hyman once again stepped up and potted 20 goals for the second year in a row. He really stepped into the net front void left by JVR. In net, Freddie had a down year. He won 29 games and 52 starts, but his .909 save percentage and a 2.85 GAA indicated everything wasn't right under the hood. Campbell somewhat impressed in his 6 games though, and Hutchison had thankfully been culled from the team, at least for a little while. So, with the pandemic raging, the league and us fans sat in limbo for a couple of months, waiting it out, I guess, before the NHL announced its return to play initiative. 24 teams, 2 cities, a 5-game pre-playoff round, a round robin among the conference's top 4 teams, all leading to a regular old Stanley Cup final. This announcement felt like a relief, but thanks to their only mildly successful season thus far, the Leafs were sorted into a qualifier series against the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Flyers earned a bye this year and were actually kind of gross. I don't remember that at all. Keefe finally had his chance to prove that he could overcome what his predecessor couldn't. A playoff round. A 5-game round at that, against Columbus, who had finished below the Leafs in the regular season and had a negative goal differential. This series win sat there like a warm apple pie, cooling on a windsill. The perfect opportunity for this team to take the next step. But as they do, this Leaf squad stumbled. No one aside from their core four could produce anything, and they almost lost the series in 4 games before pulling off a miraculous third-period comeback to stave off elimination. They scored 3 goals in the last 5 minutes to rally from a 3-0 deficit and force overtime, courtesy of the core four and Hyman. In OT, Matthews finished off this pretty Tavares pass to win the game.
Centering pass, Tavares right in front, quick shot, score! Kasperi Kapanen.
This was pure ecstasy, or relief. As a Toronto fan, I don't know the difference. Now it was time for a Leaf specialty, a chance to eliminate their foes. Chances they consistently squandered against the Bruins, but this year was different with Chief Keefe in charge. But would you look at that, another no-show. The Leafs lost 3-0, and their top right-handed defenseman only played 9 minutes. And Toronto created good chances, but they just couldn't bury them. I mean, come on, Tavares. That goal would have tied the game. Tavares, come on, fucking hell. He had so many chances.
No! 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 No!
Freddie also allowed this little goodie, which didn't help. So it was another year of not producing anything in a series-clinching game and letting the opposing goalie dictate the outcome. This year it was Korpisalo, who stopped 33 shots en route to his team's victory. A glorious chance to rewrite the team's narrative, squandered. In fact, all they did was fall deeper into the first-round loser category. This was a pre-first-round qualifying round after all. Really disappointing stuff. But the team was still young. They just needed to dust themselves off and get ready for next year. Dubas knew he needed to make changes and supplement the top buds, and he sought to do so in the delayed 2020 offseason. The shortened 56-game season would begin in January 2021, and the Leafs would play in the All-Canadian North Division, so the league wouldn't have to worry about cross-border travel in the COVID era. Something the Leafs would have to worry about, though, was the salary cap. They built this roster with the rising cap in mind, but due to the devastating economic effects of COVID, the cap was flattened. And those deals that were supposed to age gracefully remained a huge percentage of Toronto's cap moving forward. A raw deal, but not one that suited the Leafs. They managed to do that on their own. Dubas began the offseason by moving off the promising but stagnating Kasperi Kapanen, sending him to the pit for a trade return highlighted by the Penguins' 2020 first-round pick. Then his attention turned to the draft, where the Leafs drafted dynamic Russian winger Rodion Amirov 15th overall. Amirov had impressed for various Russian teams the year before. He even dressed for 21 KHL games. Dubas was flush with selections this draft though, but most were just late-round dart throws. 3 6th-rounders and 3 7th-rounders. A masterclass of an asset play. Unfortunately, these guys haven't panned out yet. His activity continued by moving Andreas Johnsson, who struggled last year and had a few years remaining on a not-so-great deal. It was a cap dump, but they got Joey Anderson in return, who looked like he could be a solid bottom-6 winger at some point. He didn't, though. Then Toronto hit the free agent market like a group of McPoyles hitting Paddy's Pub, with misguided goals and a musty sweat.
You think I'm bluffing? I think you're bluffing. Then bluff this! Ryan, stab somebody!
Dubas signed veterans Wayne Simmons, Zach Bogosian, Jimmy Vesey, Joe Thornton, and Travis Boyd to 1-year deals. while also reeling in TJ Brodie on a 4-year deal. A left-handed defenseman, but one who had played on the right before. There you go, Kyle. And finally, the Leafs retained Spezza, who impressed in his debut Leaf season. Let's run it back. And these guys made the North Division their bitch. They sprinted out of the gates and flattened everybody en route to a 16-4-2 record 2 months into the season. They even won a couple of games with Hutchinson in net. And on February 15th, Dubas added another forward to the roster, Milwaukee-born Russian Alex Galchenyuk from the Hurricanes, in exchange for defensemen David Warsofsky and Igor Korshkov, who, fun fact, scored a goal in his only NHL game. He came, he saw, he conquered, and he got sent back down to the Marlies. Then at the deadline, Dubas broke out his trusty tote again, this time adding Nick Foligno in an egregious overpay. Like just batshit bananas. The Leafs also tooled around on the fringes of their roster, adding Riley Nash, Stefan Nason, and David Riddick. With and without the new guys, this team continued their plow through the North Division. They finished the year with a 35-14-7 record and won the North Division, edging the Oilers by 5 points. This was a wild year. Everyone in the North played each other a ton, 8 times each. So teams were pretty sick of each other by the end of the season, and sick of playing in boring empty arenas. Lighting up those empty arenas though? These stars. These starry stars who truly broke into elite of the elite territory. Matthews and Marner were electric this year. Matthews lit up his Canadian rivals to the tune of 41 goals in 52 games, winning the Rocket Richard Trophy in the process and outscoring McDavid, the second highest goal scorer in the league, by 8 goals. His first Rocket, after missing out by just 1 goal a year before. And he did it all the same year he took this absolutely diabolical photo. AM34's year launched him to 5th overall in points as well, one behind the 67 produced by Mitch Marner, the league's 4th overall scorer and the setup man for many of Austin's goals. The top scorer this year? McDavid with this absurd season. Tavares, Nylander, Hyman, and Riley all had great seasons as well, with JT and Nylander gelling once again on the second line. Spezza also rewound his clock and popped off this year, in his age 37 season. So the offense was there. Dubas additions Brodie, Bogosian, and Muzzin were providing their steady defensive play and snarl on the blue line. So what else does this team need? Well, a goalie. Our big Dane Freddie started the year well, but some lackluster play and a serious knee injury that knocked him out for most of the second half of the year derailed his season and gave backup Jack Campbell a chance to prove himself. And man, Soup ran away with it. Campbell won his first 11 games in net and didn't lose his first game until April 12th. Fans loved him this year. And he even set a Leafs record for most consecutive wins by a goalie. Dude was on fire, and it was his net now. As the North Division's top seed, Toronto rolled into the league's reformatted playoffs feeling good about their chances. Their 4th-seeded opponent was Toronto's oldest rival, the Montreal Canadiens. This Habs team had gone 24-21-11 and were the worst team to make the playoffs this year. They had made it past the qualifying round last year, unlike Toronto, but lost in the first round. And they didn't make the playoffs for the 2 seasons before the pandemic either. Plus, they even had a losing record this year. Not good. But they did have Carey Price, the best Canadian goalie of the last decade, the mean and physical Shea Weber, Tyler Toffoli, Jeff Petrie, a young Nick Suzuki, Brendan Gallagher, defensive specialist Philip Deneau, and Josh Anderson. And don't forget a rookie Cole Caulfield and rat Corey Perry. These guys weren't pushovers, though the Leafs were heavy favorites. Fans were pumped up for the series. It was these storied franchises' first playoff meeting since 1979, and Matthews was seeing parallels to the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry. This is going to be a wild series. But things got off to a depressing start. Johnny Toronto, the team's captain, was killed in Game 1. It honestly looked really bad. Perry tried to jump over a fallen JT and hit his face dead on with his knee, causing an eerie scene in the empty arena. Perry's a rat, but this was just bad luck. Foligno still fought him to settle the dust, but the result was already set. Tavares was out indefinitely, but fortunately would make a full recovery. Shaken, the Leafs lost the series opener 2-1. But Toronto found resolve in the wake of losing their captain. Nylander led the charge, scoring 3 goals over the next 3 games and helping the Leafs win all 3 to take a 3-1 series lead. Matthews and Marner were somewhat producing, though Danault's line was showing that they could contain the young stars. Owning home ice advantage, the Leafs returned to Toronto for Game 5 with a chance to deal a killing blow. Another glorious chance to progress past the first round for the first time since 2004 was once again in their grasp. But it looked like the moment was too much. They were jittery and not playing up to their level, allowing the Habs to score the first 3 goals of that game. Then Hyman's first of the playoffs brought them to within 2 going into the third, where the team tied it up thanks to 2 goals by Jake Muzzin. Muzinga. So into overtime we went. The Leafs just needed a goal here to complete the comeback and throw their first-round monkey off their back. Less than a minute in, this happened. Caulfield saw into Galchenyuk's soul and picked off his risky cross-ice pass, creating a 2-on-0 that him and Suzuki passed around to perfection. Soup didn't stand a chance. Oh well, on to Game 6. Another opportunity. It was a hot May night in Ville-Marie, and it was a hotly contested game on the ice. It was 0-0 after 40 minutes with both tendies keeping their teams in it. The Habs scored 2 power play goals to tear the game open early in the third, including one courtesy of the infamous Marner crying penalty. But clutch goals by Spezza, his third of the series, and Berube tied the game and gave us another night of playoff overtime hockey. This time, the Leafs survived the first minute and piled the pressure on Montreal. But just couldn't solve Price. He even made this save on Dermott look easy. Carey was calm, cool, and collected like always. A rock for this Habs squad. Dermott, on the other hand, was a fringe player for the Leafs over the years. A new market boy, he loved playing in Toronto, but was never able to establish himself on a defensive pairing. And Dermott here is about to make an unfortunate error. Feeling the pressure of the forechecking Paul Byron, Dermott spins and fumbles the puck in his own end, giving it right to Byron, who found Kotkaniemi streaking down the middle. He shoots, he scores. Montreal had pushed it to Game 7 off of another brutal overtime turnover. Fucking hell, man. The Habs only had 2 shots in overtime. The Habs even got to celebrate this remarkable result in front of fans for the first time all season. The Quebec government allowed over 5,000 to attend the game. How generous. So the series moved back to Toronto, where the Leafs also got to play in front of a home crowd for the first time all year. A whole 550 of them. It's a Leafs Game 7. We all know what happened. Though every fiber of my being knew the result going in, I was still hoping for a chance. A chance at redemption. A Marner turnover led to this Gallagher softie that opened the scoring in the second. Campbell proudly carried on the Leafs' tradition of allowing weak 5-hole goals in clutch moments. Hyman somehow didn't bury this beautiful Marner pass. Price stoned Matthews on a 2-on-1, and Marner himself couldn't bury this juicy rebound. Carey was locked in. A Perry knee goal made it 2-0 going into the second intermission. The Leafs kept creating chances in the third, but Price saved every one. Price and the Habs were inevitable here. It's a performance that sticks in my mind. It never seemed like the Leafs were going to come back. Then Toffoli scored an empty netter that sealed it. Nylander scored his 5th of the series to break the shutout, but who fucking cares? The Leafs just blew a 3-1 series lead to the fucking Habs. It was atrocious. Leafs Nation was numb as the ridicule poured in. This was a justifiable reaction. And criticism landed squarely on the top line. Marner was held without a goal in the series while Matthews only scored 1. They combined for only 3 assists in the 3 potential series clinching games. Subpar production from a duo that costs over $22 million. And that Marner meltdown unfortunately confirmed to everybody what they already knew. The pressure seemed like too much. I love Mitchie, man, and this sucked. You wanted him to rise above it so badly. Nylander was his foil here. Calm in the face of danger, comforting his teammate and telling him he'll live another day. In this moment, Nylander became the more clutch player in many fans' eyes. And that was hammered home by his playoff performance. Spezza and Kerfoot supplied solid playoff performances as well, but once again, the team failed in crunch time. The reaction to this series was visceral. Trade Marner discourse became widespread, and I'm pretty sure Marner turned off the comments on his Instagram this year because of psychos going after him. I can't lie, it was heartbreaking. And it became clear in the aftermath that many fans were now poisoned against Marner. It was also a series that made it clear to Dubas that the core four supporting cast was lacking. None of them proved to be difference makers. Just like the core four. The Foligno trade looks especially heinous in retrospect. Dubas sent the Leafs' first-round pick in 2021 and a fourth to the Blue Jackets for 11 games and 5 assists from Foligno. A crystal clear example of the Leafs' terrible asset management that was proving to be a consistent theme. Some fans thought that Dubas found a way to add some scoring punch to his cast of extras when he acquired Jared McCann from Pittsburgh, who had just put up 32 points in 43 games. But he was only acquired so the Leafs brass could retain Kerfoot in the Seattle Kraken's expansion draft. Big brain moves only. At the draft, the Leafs' pockets were pretty bare. They only owned 3 draft picks, including only 1 in the first 4 rounds. Luckily, they hit on one of the only guys they grabbed here, Matthew Knies. Knies starred for the Tri-City Storm of the USHL in his draft year and would play 2 years of NCAA puck as a Minnesota Golden Gopher. Such a cool team name and logo. Then in free agency, the Leafs turned over a big chunk of the roster. Freddie, Bogosian, Foligno, Hyman, Jumbo Joe, Nash, and Galchenyuk were all allowed to walk. Hyman leaving has been especially painful for the Leafs, as he's flourished in Edmonton. We miss you, Zach. But all of them leaving did free up cap space for a few bold Dubas swings. Michael Bunting, David Kampf, Petr Mrazek, Ondrej Kase, and Nick Ritchie were all added via free agency, with Bunting looking like an especially intriguing addition after scoring 10 goals in only 21 games for Arizona the season prior. That Mrazek deal was quite the roll of the dice by Dubas. He had played some decent hockey for the Red Wings and Hurricanes throughout his career so far, with a crap season in Philly mixed in there. Overall, it seemed like a decent bet to solidify the Leafs' net in the wake of Freddie's departure. With the new guys in tow, the team was set for the new year. Despite the considerable public pressure, Dubas decided to retain the core four, betting yet again that they would break through. A stubbornness that wouldn't wane.
The Shanaplan.
For the 21-22 season, Toronto returned to the Atlantic, like the Redcoats after the American Revolutionary War. It was their first time playing against American teams since COVID happened, and they got off to a slow start with a 4-4-1 October. But they did lock down Morgan Rielly with an 8-year, $7.5 million per year contract extension. The longest-serving Leaf was sticking around. The slow start might have lit a fire under the Leafs' asses, because they took off after October. The team went 12-2 in November and chugged along after that. Regular season success wasn't new to the reigning and only North Division champs. But the 21-22 season was a success, even for them. The team went 54-21-7 and a dominant 31-8-2 at home. Take it to the bank, boys. And their rocket fuel, you already know who it is. Matthews started off slow this year as he recovered from off-season wrist surgery, only scoring once in his first 6 games. But he turned it on after. He went on an absolute tear, overtook Leon Draisaitl for the league-leading goals by the halfway mark of the season and scored 60 fucking goals. The first NHL player to hit 60 since Stammer in 2012. Matthews was on another level this year. His 60 goals won him his second straight Rocket Richard, joining Alex Ovechkin and Pavel Bure as the only players to win it consecutively. And he topped the 100-point plateau for the first time. A banner year that also earned him his first Hart Trophy as league MVP. The first time a Leafs player won the Hart in 67 years. Yeah, it was Toronto's year. Marner also played his best NHL season so far, scoring 97 points in only 72 games. Him, Matthews, and Michael Bunting formed one of the most dangerous lines in hockey. He even scored his first ever hat trick in the show in a 10-2 wrecking of the Red Wings where Bunting served him this beautiful drop dish. Speaking of Bunting, Dubas' hunch was correct. The 25-year-old from Scarborough scored 63 points riding shotgun to Matthews and Marner. Technically still a rookie, he was named a Calder Trophy finalist for his fine season, cruelly outplaying his 2-year, $1.9 million per year deal. It was an incredible season for the Leafs' top triumvirate. Willie and Johnny Toronto couldn't be ignored either. Nylander broke the 80-point threshold for the first time with a 34-goal, 46-assist year, while Tavares was oh so close to his 4th point-per-game season. Vancouver boy Kerfoot played on the line often and had himself a fine season, but wasn't a real difference maker. Mrazek, Dubas' other offseason swing, faltered. He was supposed to step into a goaltending platoon with Campbell, but his struggles immediately killed that idea. Mrazek never posted a monthly save percentage over 900, and he let in a ton of softies. Goaltending turned into a season-long issue for the Leafs, and nothing illustrated that better than their February 26th game against the Red Wings. Campbell gave up 4 goals in 6 minutes in the third, so Keefe yanked him from Mrazek, who immediately allowed another goal. The Leafs still won that game 10-7, but good luck pulling that shit in the playoffs. In March, he was even sent down to the minors and cleared waivers. No one wanted to touch that contract. He was quickly called up and played in the wake of a Campbell injury, but a groin injury knocked him out for the rest of the year. It was a fail. Luckily, Campbell was also on the team. The 29-year-old won 31 games in only 49 tries. Pretty gnarly. And he grabbed the starting job for himself. A babyface Joseph Woll also played the first 4 games of his career, winning 3 of them. On the blue line, Riley once again had a fine offensive season, scoring 68 points. Brody's stout defense helped Mo thrive, and Hull, Rasmus Sandin, Liljegren, and Muzzin played well enough for the Leafs offense to power them to a lot of wins. With their 54-21-7 record, they set new franchise records in wins again and points again. Though they still couldn't win the Atlantic Division, finishing second to the President's Trophy winning Florida Panthers, the only team to score more goals than the Buds. This meant they were going to have to fight their way out of the Atlantic again. Expecting a playoff dogfight, Dubas once again loaded up before the trade deadline. He brought in big rugged defender Ilya Lyubushkin to add more size and snarl, and also brought in stalwart vet Mark Giordano and solid 4th-liner Colin Blackwell at the deadline. Gio thrived in his return home, notching 12 points in his first 20 games as a Leaf and showing he had plenty of game left. As the 2nd seed, the Leafs prepared to go up against the 3rd-seeded Tampa Bay Lightning, the 2-time defending champs. It was Toronto's first time in the Atlantic Divisional round since 2019, and it presented a different challenge. This Tampa Bay team had an elite war room featuring killers and certified winners Nikita Kucherov, Victor Hedman, Steven Stamkos, Andrei Vasilevsky, Braden Point, Corey Perry, Brandon Hagel, and more. This was going to be a gauntlet for Toronto. And the thing is, they stepped up to the challenge. The Leafs smoked the Lightning 5-0 in the series opener and led the series 3-2 after 5 games. So on May 12th, they had another glorious opportunity to finally do it. To finally get past the first round. Well, Tampa scored the first 2 goals of the game, but a 3-goal charge led by Matthews and Tavares put the team in the lead going into the 3rd, on the brink of a series-clinching win. Unfortunately, Kerfoot and Kampf took 2 high-sticking penalties in 16 seconds, giving the defending champs a 5-on-3 power play with about 12 minutes left in the game. Obviously, a Kucherov power play goal lit up Amalie Arena and tied the game. This is hell. But whatever. Fuck those Habs games a year ago. This was a new day. A new chance. No, it wasn't. A Braden Point goal 18 minutes into overtime killed that hope. And the hope left in fans' hearts. Another potential series-winning opportunity squandered. Of course. Which brings us to yet another Game 7, again at home in Toronto. It was a tight-checking game, but ultimately Tampa Bay won out. 2 goals from Nick Paul and a sterling performance from Vasilevsky ended the Leafs season. I watched this at a Toronto bar where one brave Tampa Bay fan celebrated all alone. Another depressing series where this team blew a lead. This series was a little different though, because the core 4 largely played well against the defending champs. Matthews scored 4 goals and 9 points, Marner had 8 points, Nylander 7, and Tavares 6. Riley even had 3 goals and 6 points. Unfortunately, they couldn't muster much in Game 7, and the defense and Soup's goaltending let them down multiple times throughout the series. And to rub salt in the wound, the Florida Panthers won a playoff series, their first since 1996. Great year, by the way. This passed the belt for the NHL's longest playoff series win drought to the Maple Leafs, a belt they wore in shame. The team played well and produced offense, but they did falter in another Game 7. So I guess not much changed.
The Shanaplan.
Which brings us to the end of the 21-22 season. We are now 6 seasons into the Matthews-Marner era with 0 playoff series wins to show for it. Matthews' heart was nice, but it felt hollow in the absence of a long playoff run. The fans are starving at this point. With the 2022 playoffs in the books, Dubas once again readied himself for a busy offseason. This next year was going to be Keefe's 4th, technically his 3rd whole season, and Dubas knew that him and his coach were running out of time, and success needed to be found somehow. So, Kyle let Campbell, Blackwell, Kasha, Lyubushkin, and Mikheyev walk. Solid pieces for the most part, but Soup's contract was too rich to match. Spezza also called it quits on his stellar career, hanging up his skates to join Dubas in the GM's office. Kyle was also forced to sell another Leafs first-round pick just to offload another bad salary. This time, it was to get out from under Mrazek and the $7.6 million owed to him for the next 2 years. Not great. And this left the Leafs with a huge hole in net, which Dubas patched up with the signing of the once promising Ilya Samsonov to a 1-year prove-it deal, and also a trade for former Cup winner Matt Murray, who had been having a tough time in Ottawa. Oh hey, look what junior team he played for. Elsewhere in free agency, the Leafs signed Kalle Järnkrok and Victor Mete. It was honestly a pretty dull summer transaction-wise. Let's get this season on the road. The Leafs logged another slow October in 2022, but an 11-1-3 November eased concerns and they established an elite level of play that would carry them throughout this season. And that's how they found themselves with a 33-14-8 record on February 17th, 2023, where Dubas swung a massive trade in the weeks leading up to the deadline. He acquired two-way stud and Tim Hortons aficionado Ryan O'Reilly and the hard-nosed Noel Achari from the St. Louis Blues for a package of picks, Adam Gaudette, and Mikhail Abramov, a dead Russian businessman. Honestly, a huge grab that really fortified the team down the middle. Then Dubas went to the casino ATM to take out more cash and swung another trade, this time sending a package including a 2025 first-rounder and Joey Anderson for D-man Jake McCabe and forward Sam Lafferty. McCabe had term left on his deal, which was actually pretty sweet. They also landed former Leafs draftee Luke Schenn before the deadline and moved on from Rasmus Sandin, who was struggling to assert himself in Keefe's lineup. With these additions, the team finished the season strong and accrued a record of 50-21-11 and were once again led by the core four. Marner led the team in scoring this year and came agonizingly close to cracking the 100-point plateau for the first time. He did get 69 assists though. Nice. Meanwhile, Nylander continued his steady growth and hit his first ever point-per-game season with a 40-goal, 47-assist year. Snipe Show Willie was firmly in his prime now. Matthews came back down to earth after his 60-goal explosion a year ago, but still finished with 40 goals and 45 assists in 74 games. Injuries forced him to miss time and affected his play throughout the year. And Johnny Tavares hit 80 points as well, securing his 4th ever point-per-game season. Overall, the big boys produced. But this season's stats really illustrate the lack of scoring depth on the Leafs roster. Outside of those elite core 4 performances, not one player had more than 50 points. Dubas and the Leafs brass have been paying up for years to fortify the team's defense, but never seemed to ask, what if we added another guy who could produce? O'Reilly was a great two-way guy, so at least he was here this year. In net, Ilya Samsonov established himself as the team's starter despite his somewhat erratic play. But he won 27 games and entered the playoffs as Toronto's starting goalie. Woll also poked his head out again, this time winning 6 games with some sweet stats. Before the regular season ended, Dubas made another signing, inking Matthew Knies to his entry-level deal. The young Knies racked up 21 goals and 21 assists in his sophomore season for the University of Minnesota and was eager to jump into the show. This guy is fucking huge and is literally Dubas' best draft pick for the Leafs. In the playoffs, the Leafs were once again matched up with Tampa Bay in the divisional round. The exact same 2-3 seed series that we saw last year. Knowing the Leafs, it'll probably be the same result, right? Nah. Second time's the charm, baby. A 7-3 opening game destruction at the hands of the Lightning put the team on its heels. But this team rallied. The Leafs responded with a 7-goal win of their own and stole the next 2 games in Florida in overtime, making Emily Arena their own. Which meant we were back in a familiar scenario, a home game with a chance to clinch the series. A Mike Tyson knockout punch was in order. But Tampa Bay bobbed and weaved, won Game 5 4-2 and survived. The series was returning to Florida. There, these foes played close, tight-checking hockey. Matthews scored his 5th of the series to take the lead, but Stammer evened it up in the 3rd, bringing us to overtime. Holy shit, another overtime with a chance to win the series. Can they finally do it? Well, less than 5 minutes into the first overtime period, Johnny Toronto scored the biggest goal of his career.
Behind the net, coming out in front, John scores! John Tavares! They finally caught lightning in a bottle!
The Shanaplan. The Shanaplan.
Elation, fucking relief. The Buds finally did it. They won a series for the first time since 2004. Almost 2 decades of anxiety and disappointment washed away that night. It was almost unbelievable. I just know Matt Sundin was smiling somewhere. It was an incredible time, but it was too short. The second round started 3 days later against the Florida Panthers, a team led by newcomer Matthew Tkachuk, star center Alex Barkov, Sam Reinhart, Sergei Bobrovsky, and Sam Bennett. It was primed to be a tough series. But it wasn't. At least not for the Panthers. They torched the Leafs and physically dominated them this series. Once Knies went down with an injury, they lost a huge physical edge, and this image of Radko Gudas about sums it up. Domination. It wasn't close, and the Panthers won in 5. So all that relief, all of those hopes of going on a long run now that the first round monkey was off the team's back, dissipated in a flash. And it was swiftly replaced with anger. You see, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares were effectively neutralized this series. None managed more than 3 points, and Matthews' 0 goals in the series was impossible to ignore. It was a series that made even the staunchest Core 4 believers stop and think, did these guys really have it? And that feeling bled into the offseason, where it seemed like anything was on the table. If there was ever a time to trade Marner and shuffle the deck, it was now. 2023, after another brief playoff run. Maybe they could have taken a lesson from the Panthers, who themselves were upset in the playoffs before they moved their highest scoring winger for Matthew Tkachuk. A guy with real bite who's proven to be a difference maker in the playoffs. Now is the time to move Marner, before his no-trade clause kicked in on July 1st, 2023. Dubas was entertaining the idea, but then he got hit with some more serious news. While playing hardball on his next contract, Shanahan and MLSE just fired him, bringing the Golden Boy to the slaughter. With that, Dubas' reign in Toronto was over. As the team's general manager, the teams under Dubas set franchise records for wins and points in the regular season, went 221, 109, and 42, and won 1 playoff round. A bright, analytical hockey mind, but his confidence never wavered in the Core 4 until the very end. To replace him, Shanahan and MLSE brought in Brad Treliving, the former Calgary Flames GM who traded Tkachuk to Florida, and the son of this old guy from Dragon's Den. And though it seemed like everything was on the table, Treliving quickly made it apparent that no seismic shifts were incoming. The Core 4 played great. They just needed more around them.
The Shanaplan.
So, it was time to move on and get ready for 2023-24. This offseason again saw the team turn over a large part of its roster. O'Reilly, Shen, Kerfoot, Hall, Bunting, and Achari all left for greener pastures. In O'Reilly's case, that was another first-rounder traded for only about 20 games of a player. Bunting performed well, but he leveraged his network into a much larger deal. Treliving didn't waste any time putting his own stamp on the roster. The new GM signed Max Domi, Tyler Bertuzzi, and John Klingberg to 1-year prove-it deals, while also signing enforcer Ryan Reeves to a 3-year deal. A little rich for a guy who would barely play. The Leafs also retained Samsonov, and with the addition of Martin Jones and the emerging Joseph Woll, were comfortable riding this threesome for the year. Tragic news was announced that summer as well. Rodion Amirov, the young man the Leafs had drafted just 3 years ago, sadly passed away at only 21. He had been battling brain cancer for over a year, and tragically lost that battle on August 14th, 2023. Just heartbreaking. Cancer is a bitch. I wish we had the opportunity to see you in a Leaf sweater, Rodion. Rest in peace. But time relentlessly marches on, and the big items on Tree Living's checklist were still left unchecked. You see, Matthews and Nylander were walking into the final year of their contracts, and neither had extensions yet. And anxiety was building in Toronto. The city couldn't fathom a world where their 25-year-old star walked for free. Fortunately, the Scottsdale, Arizona kid wanted to stay. On August 23rd, Matthews signed a 4-year extension that would make him the highest paid player in the league. 4 years, $53 million. With an AAV of $13.25 mil. Surpassing Nathan MacKinnon's $12.6 mil per year deal. The guy with the most goals in the league since 2016, his rookie year, wanted to stay and win in the big smoke. Plus he got that fat contract. Whatever, he was signed. Nylander, on the other hand, wasn't yet. And his extension talks carried into the season, where the Leafs didn't get off to a great start. A 5-3-1 October was okay, followed by a 7-3-2 November, but they were really being forced to outscore their lackluster defense and goaltending. And fuck, their goaltending was rough. Samsonov couldn't stop a beach ball, and his confidence plummeted. By New Year's Eve 2023, he had a 5-2-6 record with a dismal 3.94 goals against average and an .862 save percentage. I wanted to puke just looking at it. This stretch of play earned him a place on waivers. The Leafs were struggling in general at this point as well. The team was 17-10-7, and a 9-3 loss to the lowly Buffalo Sabres just before Christmas highlighted their struggles. They're just allowing way too many goals. Regardless, they pressed forward. The rotating crease of Woll, Martin Jones, and Samsonov, yeah, he wasn't in the minors for that long, settled down enough for the Leafs to start winning more games. By the time the regular season had wrapped, this club had secured their 8th straight playoff appearance. Overall, it was kind of a crap year though. The team didn't look like a contender for the most part, and Keefe seemed to be losing the room. The Leafs even went through 3 4-game losing streaks and allowed the most goals against since this woeful 2012 team. But that was all overshadowed by AM34, who went nuclear again this season. He played almost the entire year and scored 69 goals, beating Alex Ovechkin's 65 for the most goals in a single season since the 2004 lockout. It was a special year for him, and his exploits earned him his 3rd Rocket Richard trophy in the last 4 years. Basically shouting to the world that he deserved that big deal. Nylander also continued on his gradual superstar development path. Willie the Man scored 98 points in 82 games, and he leveraged his hot play into a massive extension in January. Tree Living had now locked up 2 of the core 4 long-term. Marner once again played setup man for Matthews, notching 59 assists and 85 points in 69 games. Morgan Riley had himself a fine year too, notching 58 points in 72 games. Plus, he cross-checked Sens player Ridley Gregg in the face after he slap-shotted into an empty net. George Parros was probably bricked the fuck up watching this replay. But Tavares, he was disappointing. He only scored 65 points in 80 games. Not the type of production you expect from an $11 million man. He was 32 now, and the legs, which weren't too swift to begin with, looked to be slowing down. Domi, Bertuzzi, and McCabe all had solid years, and Bobby McMahon finally joined the party. Bobby actually cleared waivers early in the season, but he made the most of his call-up later, recording his first career hat trick against the Blues in February and finishing the year with 15 goals and 9 assists. Not bad for a 27-year-old in his rookie year. Nyes also played his first full year, scoring 15 times. Not too much, but it was clear that he could develop into a difference maker. Knowing the defense couldn't hold back a Panda Bear, Tree Living made a few additions. Ilya Lyubushkin, again, Joel Edmondson, and Connor Dewar. Defensive dudes. So with the balance of their electric offense and somber defense, the Leafs finished the season 46, 26, and 10. Good enough for third in the Atlantic and another divisional battle. This year's foe was a former frequent sparring partner, the Boston Bruins, who went 47, 20, and 15. This was the team that had beaten them twice in the playoffs. But it also looked different. Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, Tuukka Rask, and David Krejci, the souls of that veteran Bruins culture, had all retired. Pasternak, Marchand, and DeBrusk were all still there though. Familiar hated faces for Leafs fans. Boston was the favorite this series, and the team played like it. Boston took 3 out of the first 4 games, setting up a classic Leafs scenario. One they actually excel in. A playoff series comeback. Nylander actually missed the first 3 games of the series with crushing migraines. Let me tell you, those fucking suck. But with him back in the lineup, Toronto stormed back into the series thanks to stellar play by Joseph Woll and clutch goals by Knies and Willie, teeing up a Game 7 at TD Garden. Toronto Dominion's Garden. Kind of a home game for the Buds, right? Here it was, a chance to slay the mystical black and yellow dragon in the Leafs' fable. And after Nylander scored the first goal of the game in the second period, it seemed possible. But Hampus Lindholm ripped a shot through traffic a minute and a half later to tie it up. With neither team budging, it was time for the ultimate, Game 7 overtime. The clutchest time in sports, when the cream truly rises to the top. Now is the time for the Leafs to show that last year's fail against the Panthers was in the past, that they were better now. But the cream rose to the top pretty quickly, and it proved to be black and yellow. Pasternak broke in behind Toronto's defense not even 2 minutes in and finished off this pretty off-the-board set play to win the game, eliminating the Leafs. He simply jumped the rush and caught everyone off guard, including Marner and Riley, one of whom should have tracked him. It was just more of the same, more of this bullshit. It had been abundantly clear that the team and the core 4 weren't good enough for years. So why did we keep banging our head against the wall?
The Shanaplan.
In the wake of their playoff disappointment, Keefe, the coach who had led the team out of the first round for the first time in the post-lockout era, was fired, axed, canned. Keefe left the team with a 212, 97, and 40 record after almost 5 seasons with the team. But he went just 16 and 21 in the playoffs, including 1 and 5 in playoff series. His team's power play went 1 for 21 in the first round against Boston this year as well, highlighting another special teams failure for the Leafs. You've got to be accountable when you don't meet expectations, Keefe said. So the Chief Keefe era was over, making room for another Chief to step in. After a 2-week-long search, Tree Living and Leafs management hired Craig Berube as the team's new head coach. The man who led the St. Louis Blues to their 2019 Stanley Cup.
Pump it up here. We're here for a fucking reason, because we're a fucking good hockey team, and we're gonna fucking come home with a cup here tonight. Let's fucking go. Sonny, Bo, Perry, Benner, let's go.
Along with Berube came his system. Toronto was going to play tighter hockey and was in desperate need of a real defensive system. Berube and Tree Living were aligned on this, and set to modify the team in their vision in the 2024 offseason. And did they ever remake the team? Tree Living added top pairing defender Chris Tanev to bring him home, and then brought in Oliver Ekman-Larsson, stout goaltender Anthony Stolarz, and Steven Lorenz, all of whom had just helped the Panthers win the 2024 Cup. Tree Living had to let Bertuzzi, TJ Brody, Edmondson, Lyubushkin, and Samsonov leave to make room under the cap for these new guys. But even then, it looked like a step forward. The new tandem of Stolarz and Wall was fairly unproven, but the addition by subtraction of Samsonov made the net look a lot sturdier. The Leafs also signed Max Domi to a big extension that hasn't aged that well in the years since he got it. Tree Living couldn't agree on contract extensions with Marner or Tavares this offseason, but they still had all season to hammer things out, I guess. And before the 24-25 season began, Toronto announced Austin Matthews as the team's new captain, replacing John Tavares, who graciously stepped aside for the young star. That's the kind of leader and team player he is. A new captain to lead the team in a new era. Let's go. When the Leafs opened their 24-25 season, the difference in play was obvious. They battened down the hatches and tried to get used to Berube's more 50-50 style hockey. The kind of style that could potentially lead to more playoff success. And these guys were good, even though they weren't supplying the gaudy goal totals of a year ago. After a so-so opening half of the season, these guys really seemed to settle into Berube's system. They were great at winning one-goal games, so margins were a little slim. After New Year's 2025, the Leafs went 29-13-2 and looked dominant as the season neared its end, going 7-1 in April to clinch first place in the Atlantic for the first time in franchise history. The team's first division championship since Matt Sundin had hair. A 52-26-4 record in Berube's first season is nothing to sneer at, and the Leafs' play gave the team and its fans confidence that they could build a deep playoff run. This trend was tremendously aided by the reimagined blue line. Tanev and OEL both seamlessly slid into the lineup, fortifying it. Then the deadline additions of Brandon Carlo and defensive centerman Scott Lawton put it over the top. This team's blue line was bigger, stronger, and completely bought into the defensive play Berube demanded of his team. These Leafs allowed 32 fewer goals this year, and their goalies were locked in, especially Stolarz, who looked elite in his limited action and won 21 out of his 34 games with a sterling .926 save percentage. He was the real deal. Woll also played well, though not to the same degree. But to win hockey, you also need to score goals. And the Leafs did, though they scored 35 fewer than last year. Like I said, tighter, lower scoring hockey was the goal. Matthews continued his trend of following up 60-goal seasons with down years, but a down year for him is still 78 points in 67 games. Injuries limited him this year, and we found out he played through one all year after sustaining it in training camp. But Marner, he electrified other teams during his contract year. The Markham boy broke the 100-point threshold for the first time thanks to 75 apples and 27 goals. Yeah, he was going to be paid by somebody. Willie also had himself a year, scoring 45 goals and 84 points, earning himself his second season where he had more goals than assists. Love that. And Johnny Toronto found new life under Berube as he compiled a vintage season. Tavares scored 38 goals, his most since the 47 he scored in his first season in Toronto, and notched 74 points. Remember, it was a contract year for him as well. Knies truly broke out in 24-25, as this big kid scored 29 goals and 29 assists. Fuck a sophomore slump. This was a sophomore party. His grinding net front presence was an element the Leafs sorely needed. These newly crowned division winners finally got to avoid the Atlantic Divisional round. This year, they instead engaged in a different dogfight, the first Battle of Ontario since 2004. Historically, the Leafs had won all 4 playoff matchups with Ottawa, so they had history on their side. But the Sens had taken all 3 games off the Leafs this year, flashing the potential to upset Chief and the Buds. It was a tight series. The Leafs stomped the Sens in Game 1 6-2, but the next 2 games went to overtime. Toronto won both thanks to some clutch/lucky bounces to go up 3-0 on the Sens. Could a sweep of Ontario be in order? Nope. The Sens buckled down and won Game 4 at home, in overtime, to live and fight another day. Jake Sanderson scored the winner and the Canadian Tire Center went fucking bananas. So the Leafs returned home with another chance to end the series, this time in their own barn. Nah, they lost 4-0. After some early series softies, Linus Ullmark showed why he's a Vezina Trophy winner, stopping 29 shots to shut out the Leafs. Thankfully, the Leafs pulled through. Patches scored a clutch goal, his first of the playoffs, with about 5 minutes left in the third to secure the series victory. Thank God. Peace, Ottawa. I love your city, but hate where the rink is. On to round 2, where the Leafs face yet another opportunity to slay a hated dragon. It was a chance for revenge on the Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup champs. A true test against a fearsome contender. And I don't know what Chief said to the team in the locker room, but these boys looked fired up to start the series. Toronto took full advantage of home ice, winning the first 2 games at home. A 2-goal Nylander first period helped them survive a late Florida push in Game 1, then a nice balanced goal-scoring performance helped them edge Florida 4-3 in Game 2. This Domi wrister to pull ahead in the second was so sick, and Marner's winner was a thing of beauty. especially since Lundell had tied the game 17 seconds earlier. Unfortunately, a Sam Bennett elbow to Stolarz' head knocked him out of the series after Game 1 and elevated the temperature of the series to a boiling point. Woll would man the net for the rest of the second round. Then Game 3 happened. Knies and Tavares helped the Leafs get off to a hot start in Florida, and it looked like another 3-0 series lead was on tap. But that's when Florida launched its onslaught. They scored 3 straight to take a 4-3 lead in the game and ended up winning in overtime. Thanks to this guy, Brad fucking Marchand. Of course it was him. The Panthers then showed their championship pedigree and took control of the series, winning the next 2 games to take a 3-2 series lead. The Leafs won a tight Game 6 to survive, but then we know what happened. In Game 7 at Scotiabank Arena, the Leafs got run out of their own barn. The Panthers outshot the Leafs 18-5 in the second and completely took over, taking a 3-0 lead and looking dominant. The Leafs looked like shells of themselves out there. The Panthers won 6-1, ending Toronto's season again. All that talk about this team being different, having Chief and his magic in their corner, having a real blue line and solid goaltending, it all went up in smoke in another Game 7 loss. Their 7th Game 7 loss in a row. And it was a blowout. Fans were disgusted with the team. It was a catastrophic no-show. Just so depressing. All that promise gone, as Marchand, Tkachuk, and Bennett's team waltzed into the Eastern Conference Finals and eventually won the Cup, cementing a dynasty. It was over, and losing this year stung even more because Mitch Marner, the lifelong Leafs fan, had just finished out his contract, meaning he could sign anywhere. And he soon did, signing an 8-year deal with the Las Vegas Golden Knights in a sign-and trade, writing the conclusion to the Leafs' Core 4 era in the process. Looking back at this Leafs era, a few things come to mind besides my depression. While rivals were willing to make bold moves, the Leafs sat timidly, afraid to rock the boat by moving one of the Core 4. They had some major deadline whiffs too, with their longer-term additions, McCabe, Muzzin, or Campbell, providing more value, both in play and contract. Spending assets on guys like Foligno hurt the team's ability to compete moving forward. The team also had to trade 2 first-rounders just to move off of shitty contracts. Imagine if they had drafted impact players with those picks, or even traded them for someone who could play. This team's inability to form a sustainable farm system is damning. They started pushing their chips in way too early. But ultimately, this team's inability to show up when it mattered is what truly did them in. 7 Game 7 losses in a row. That's the legacy of this Matthews-Marner era. And now Mitch Marner has left. Not with some big last hurrah or nice goodbye. No, he left with simmering resentment that seems to go both ways. Him for the city that never really rallied behind him as the hometown boy, and the fans who watched him squeeze the Leafs for everything he could before fading every spring. Sometimes you get the storybook ending, where the hometown hero brings Lord Stanley home. Sometimes, things just end.
The Shanaplan. The Shanaplan.